thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Biden, for agreeing to have this conversation. The Hispanic audience will be very grateful to hear directly from both of you. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks.
We are here at this food bank in Houston, and food banks are being the source of, for many affected by the pandemic, and the only way they have to bring food to their tables, to bring food to their families. Mr. President, you promised a check for the families that are in need of that financial help. When exactly are going to receive the $1,400 check? And for undocumented immigrants that are not going to receive this relief, do you have any plans to help them?
Well, two things. One, I can't guarantee when the check will come because the Congress has to pass it. So I'm waiting for the House of Representatives to vote on my package, as well as the Senate to vote on. But I expect that they'll be getting within a couple weeks after the bill is passed in the House and Senate that I can sign, that I expect they'll be getting a check for $1,400 shortly after that, meaning within a couple weeks after that. So it could be another 3 weeks or so before someone would get a check.
And to help the undocumented immigrants that are, many of them, essential workers that are not going to receive the relief, do you have any plans for them?
Well, I do. Number one, I want to make sure they all are able to get vaccinated, and so they're protected from COVID. Without the ICE or anyone else interfering, they should not show up, should not be arrested for showing up, for being able to get a vaccination. We also making sure that they're going to be able to have enough food. I propose in the legislation, not just these food banks, but increasing SNAP payments and other payments that are the things that allow people. 40% of the children in America are going hungry, and a lot of them are in communities of color, Hispanic communities and Black communities, as well as Asian Pacific. And so we have to focus on making sure they have opportunities, because they're making significant contributions. Look at all the number of people who are engaged in dealing with the pandemic who happen to be children who are dreamers. There's thousands of them. So I've been focusing on what we do to keep families together and to treat people humanely while they're here, particularly the people who are helping everyone else stay around and alive.
The vaccination process is going well. More than 50 million people have received the vaccine. But you also mentioned the Black community and the Hispanic community and how badly have been they affected by this pandemic. They are, just a few of them have been vaccinated compared to the big population. Some of them don't believe or are afraid of the vaccine. Can you guarantee that those communities affected are going to receive the vaccine, and can you assure them that it's safe to be vaccinated?
I can assure them it's safe, number one. And I can assure them I'm doing everything to make it possible to make it easier for them to get access to the vaccine. We're making sure to have mobile units going to communities. We're going from here to look at a site that's a major stadium that's in a mixed area, so they can get in an automobile and drive and walk, drive through and get the vaccination. Get the vaccination if it's available to you, but I promise you. That's why, for example, I provided for community health centers to have direct access federally to vaccinations. That's why I provided for literally thousands more of vaccinators. We had to increase the supply of vaccine, plus we had to get a lot of people who were not available up to now to come and put the vaccination in someone's arm. And we're focusing on communities that have been left behind, including rural communities as well as inner city and communities that relate that don't have, look, if you're a 65-year-old woman living alone and you want to get in line to get a vaccine at the local pharmacy, you may be 3 miles away and have no way to get there. And so we're doing everything possible.
And for communities of color, I think it's all about trust. And I think during our campaign, I think we tried to build that trust. And when we were elected, and we're trying to get out the information through the churches and through the leaders in the Hispanic communities and in the African American communities, that it is safe and that you have to believe in the science. And that's why we we go to their leaders, and also we have, and Dr. Fauci. I mean, it's all based on science.
And that's why we're with you.
Dr. Biden, you are an educator. Do you think it's time for kids to go back to
Absolutely.
schools, like
Absolutely. I'm a teacher. I'm teaching now, and no one wants to be in the classroom more than the teachers do, and then their parents, and then the children. So we've got to get them back, but we have to get them back safely.
But will
Well,
the
we can't-
teachers have any? Excuse me, Mr. President, go ahead.
No, but there's a way to do that. That's why in this act this legislation I have submitted provides for the means to open those schools, particularly schools from kindergarten through 8th grade. Number one, we can get those open quickly. All we need to do is provide the help for the schools for sanitation, for smaller class sizes, for example, everything from bus drivers to the sanitation workers in the schools. And so we can do that, and we can do it now.
And those educators should be prioritized.
That's important. Mr. President, in the 5 weeks you've been in office, you have been taking many actions to revert Trump administration's anti-immigration policy. But today, the Washington Post reports that your administration has plans to open tents at Del Rio, a town close to the border. Can you confirm that?
Well, what I can confirm is there's over 70, right now there's thousands of immigrants, thousands of unaccompanied children coming across the border. We've been able to place a significant number of them in licensed facilities throughout the country, shelters throughout the country. But what happened is, in Texas, they opened up one that was a former one used in the administration, the last administration. Our hope and expectation is that won't stay open very long, that we'll be able to provide for every kid who comes across the border safely to be housed in a facility that's licensed. And what we're trying to do, and we have literally hundreds of people doing it now, connect them with families in this country. Get them to the families that they came to see or they're looking for. And we've already connected thousands of them for that way. And so that's our hope, is to unite these children with families while they wait to have a hearing.
And this administration is doing it in a humane way. And that's really important. I mean, we want to make sure that these children are safe, that they get mental health services, they get physical health services, they get education. So we are really concerned about these children.
For how long is the administration planning to have the kids in these facilities? Not only the tents that you mentioned, Mr. President, but also the other facilities that look like portable containers, or I don't know, how can you call them? But really brings bad memories from the kids in cages. And how is it different from?
Well, it's much different in terms of we have people there helping them. We have people that are in those facilities taking care of them. But my hope is they all are able to get out. All are able to get into licensed facilities and or be united with family members here in the United States.
On other topic, I wanted to ask you about the U.S. intelligence reports on Jamal Khashoggi's assassination.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, how far are you willing to go to press Prince bin Salman in Saudi Arabia to comply with human rights?
I spoke yesterday with the king, not the prince. Made it clear to him that the rules are changing, and we're going to be announcing significant changes today and on Monday. We are going to hold them accountable for human rights abuses, and we're going to make sure that they, in fact, and if they want to deal with us, they have to deal with it in a way where human rights abuses are dealt with. And we're trying to do that across the world, but particularly here. This report has been sitting there. The last administration wouldn't even release it. We immediately, when I got in, found the report, read it, got it, and released it, released today. And it is outrageous what happened.
Well, Mr. President, thank you very much. Dr.
Thank you,
Biden,
ILIA.
thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you about the Cesar Chavez image behind your desk. Why Cesar Chavez?
Two reasons. One, originally when I ran for the United States Senate at age 29 for the Senate, I supported the farm workers because we have a large agricultural population. It was a big issue, and Chavez was leading the effort. And I almost lost the election because I was so vocal, number one. But number two, I admire him. And number three, his granddaughter works for him.
Yes.
Of course. Are we going to see you, Dr. Biden, soon in a classroom?
Well, I'm already teaching virtually. So I've been teaching since January, and when the schools reopen, I'm going to be there.
Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you for this conversation with Univision.
Can't allow the Republicans to try to dominate the narrative. But at this point, the actual facts on the ground are dominating the narrative. It's not the Republicans are reacting, and of course, yes, they'll maybe use this to their political advantage, but the facts on the ground are what they are.
Yeah, they've shut the media out. That's a fact. The pictures you're seeing are from a Democratic congressman from Texas, Henry Cuellar.
Yes, Henry Cuellar, yep.
He was on our program about a week ago. So these are some of the very few and rare images we have seen from thousands and thousands of people who are now here in the U.S.
And you'll remember that Democratic congresspeople, they went down during the Trump administration. They were able to have access. They took a lot of pictures. They had a lot of photo ops. They have done nothing of the sort this time yet. We'll see if it changes.
So in a moment here, Republicans taking their fight against President Biden's agenda to court, how the state attorneys general are leading that charge. And Harris Faulkner with a big interview coming up in a matter of moments. Good morning, Harris.
Good morning, Bill, Dana, good to see you. The gloves are off. Former President Trump is tearing into the Biden administration over the dire situation now unfolding at our southern borders. Did you see those new pictures that Bill and Dana were just showing you? Unbelievable. Trump says President Biden turned national triumph into a national disaster. His words. The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, joins me on the Faulkner Focus top of the hour. Former President Trump is tearing into President Biden for the escalating crisis at our southern border, saying Biden turned the most secure border in history into a national disaster, causing death and human tragedy. I'm Harris Faulkner, and you are in the Faulkner Focus. President Biden is still not calling it a crisis, as you know, and shrugging off lawmakers' requests for him to travel to the southern border immediately to see the situation for himself. He told reporters he'll go eventually.
Are you thinking of going to the border?
At some point I will, yes.
Do you want to see firsthand what's going on in those facilities?
I know what's going on in those facilities.
President Biden has yet to hold a solo news conference where he would actually face more questions on all this, as you might imagine that as well. But we're expecting one from him on Thursday. Details coming. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says it's not Biden's policies, but Trump's policies that are to blame for the migrant surge. Watch.
Do you not see a connection between the surge at the border and the policy changes that Joe Biden has made in his first 2 months?
Chris, I do not. What I am seeing is the result, and what we are seeing is the result of President Trump's dismantlement of the safe and orderly immigration processes that were built over many, many years by presidents of both parties.
Mayorkas also recently said the border is closed, but unaccompanied minors will not be deported. Republicans say the border is wide open, and migrants know it. And we've actually seen some migrants say exactly the same thing.
Why did you decide to come now?
To take advantage of the opportunity that the president has given to the people from Central America to come with their families.
Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president?
Definitely not.
So did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president?
Basically. The main thing was the violence in my country. And the second thing, I think, was Joe Biden. It's like letting up my hope.
Biden promised that we can cross with minors.
In the Faulkner Focus now exclusively, live by phone, former President Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump, you're with me?
Yes, I am.
Let's start with why you are calling this a national disaster.
Well, they're destroying our country. As the gentleman said, the violence in his country. Well, we're bringing the violence to our country because many of the people coming are not nonviolent people. They're violent people. Many of the people coming. These countries don't send out their finest, and in some cases, I'm sure you have wonderful, fine people, but you also have criminals, you have murderers, you have sex traffickers, you have a lot of very bad people coming into our country, and they're doing nothing about it. They're going to be released, or they're already being released. Yesterday, they announced that they're just going to let them go into the country. No courts, no nothing. It's crazy. They're destroying our country. This is just like with the vaccine, where they say, oh, let's blame Trump. We had record numbers, record positive numbers. And frankly, in another couple of weeks, we could have finished up the wall, but they ended construction. And the only reason it didn't get finished, it took me 2.5 years to win the 11 lawsuits that we had, many of them by the Democrats in Congress. So, I mean, the wall is incredible how it's worked. In the large sections, we have almost 500 miles built. And the large sections where you have it, where you don't have an entry point, it's been incredible. Where you have an entry point now, all they have to do is put guards there. But if those points get closed up over a short period of time, they just were open to bring all of the equipment and everything back into the United States because, frankly, would rather not leave it in Mexico.
You know, what you're talking about makes me wonder how in the world you close the border. I mean, when I heard DHS Secretary Mayorkas say that, I kind of sat back in my seat and I said, well, but you have all of these gaps. We've been showing them, McAllen, Texas, and other areas. So can you really close the border? What is that like?
Very easily. It's just little sections. And then some sections you want to open because that's an entry point. That's where you have your security because you do take people in. You have people coming in, helping the farmers. They've been coming in for years. If we ever stopped that with our farmers, frankly, the farmers would go out of business in California, wine country, various other places. So you take them in. But what happens is you do have some open points because obviously we have people coming back and forth. But you also have, in some cases, areas which weren't completed, like gate areas and other areas, which would have been completed very quickly. You could have had it done in a month. And these are contractors that have been largely paid for the work to get it done. And now they're going to want money not to get it done. They'll ask for more money not to do it. They're professionals, okay? That's what they do. They're contractors. And it's a shame. But, you know, I heard him. He must be incompetent because we had unbelievable numbers, and we're going to have numbers like nobody's had once the rest of the wall was closed up. Oh, it's going to be many, many times worse. It's only going to get worse. And, you know, they like to blame the previous administration, just like they said, oh, no, we didn't produce the vaccine. They produced the vaccine, yet Biden got his shot in December. You know, they produced the vaccine. They didn't produce anything. All they did is take our policy, and our policy was incredible. Warp Speed, Operation Warp Speed was incredible. And all they did was take our policy. But, you know, they're saying, oh, they did the vaccine. They didn't do the vaccine. I did the vaccine. By pushing the FDA. It would have taken 5 years. You probably would have never had a vaccine, but it would have taken 5 years to get it approved. I got it done in 9 months, and we have not only a vaccine, but a vaccine that really works well. And we have, by the way, we have many vaccines. We have now 4 companies that have them, and that's only because of the Trump administration. It has nothing to do with the mess you're watching now that are destroying our country and taking away freedom of speech and taking away people's rights.
You know, I want to get to this because it's just happened now, and I want to double-check this with our producers. The DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, has resigned, Mr. President.
Well, I'm not surprised. Good. That's a big victory for our country.
Hold on. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let me listen to my team one more time. Forgive me. Forgive me. That has not happened. But and I apologize, listening to the team and you.
Cross off
but
that victory.
I know that you. Right. Well, and I want to tell everybody, you issued a statement last night, and you called for that, though. And you're just talking about him, just to clarify, and as somebody who you feel is not competent to handle what's going on. So let me clean up on aisle 7 with my error. He has not resigned, and let me move right to what you are calling for, and others too, for him to move out of the way and possibly get somebody who can do the job. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that'll eventually happen. I think that he's way over his head. All he had to do is sit down in his chair. The systems were taking care of themselves. We had great people there. A lot of those people were removed. The policies were removed. we had to stay in Mexico because what happened is hundreds of thousands of people were coming into our country. Our laws were so bad. We had to change. We had to get things changed, rules, regulations, laws. What we went through was incredible over a 2-year period, especially the first 2 years. And then we got it, and it was so beautiful. I mean, you look at the numbers, it was so beautiful. And then they came in, and I think just because we did such a good job and because it was me, they went, let's go the opposite. Let's let everybody come into the country. And now, I mean, it was just announced they're allowing everybody to walk through and just come in, and they're not taking anything. They have no information about the people. And that's the people they know about. How about the people they don't know about? All those thousands of people that are coming in where there's absolutely no protection. And the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal, and ICE, who are phenomenal, they're taking care of children now. They're like babysitters right now. They've been taking off their jobs, standing at the wall. And Mexico's no longer protecting us. I had 28,000 soldiers, compliments of Mexico, protecting our country. Because I said, if you don't put them there, we're going to charge you tariffs on your products that you sell into the United States and make a fortune. That's the only reason we had them. So we had great numbers. All they had to do is continue our policies. And even, you know, I mean, look, we won the election as far as I'm concerned. We had a great election. We got almost 75 million votes. But we were going to make it even more stringent with the understanding that we want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. Very simple.
So let me ask you this. I want to get back a moment and revisit the COVID-19, because that, you know, you ran on very strongly on the border. That was a single issue for you. The pandemic hadn't happened. Biden ran strongly on COVID-19. Yet I'm learning from Chad Wolf, your former acting DHS secretary, and Democrats as well, that people are crossing the border, and sometimes we can test them and sometimes we can't. So as a former president, you know a lot of details that we don't have access right now to because we haven't had our first solo news conference with Biden. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just from a president's perspective. Title 42, what would it do to stem the tide in terms of COVID-19 right now, and is it being applied in your estimation? You created that.
They're applying nothing. They're not doing Title 42 or any title. People are just pouring into our country, and they will destroy our country. They will destroy our country. You can't take millions of people. They'll have millions of people before this mess is over. And they've got some kind of a political theory, I guess, that it's a good thing. Maybe. I don't think it is. I think it's a very bad thing for our country. Again, we want people to come in, but they have to be able to help our country. They have to come in through merit, and they have to come in legally. Right now, you don't have anything protecting our country. You have people just flowing through, coming through. And they're the numbers are so vast. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They said 20 years. I'll bet you it's maybe forever. Maybe it's, from the beginning of this whole mess. But it's much more than 20 years. They said the worst in 20 years. No, they're going to destroy our country in other ways, too, if you look at what's going on. You're going to have packed the court.
Well, Montana
You're going to have big tax increases. They're going to take your guns away. I mean, take a look at what they're doing with take a look at what's coming up, and I predicted it all. Now, I must say, I never thought that Biden, and it's not Biden, it's other people that are, putting stuff in front of him.
You don't think it's him?
But I never thought that Biden in a million years would be worse. Nobody did. Would be far worse than Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Sanders on steroids. This is what he's doing with all, and you haven't seen anything yet. So the Second Amendment is going to be obliterated. And there's no stopping them. And our leadership, Mitch, isn't strong enough to stop people. Never was. That's like one of the big secrets. But he had the majority. But now that he's not in the majority, he's not doing his thing. He's not doing what he should be doing. There are ways to stop some of this stuff that's happening, but you're going to see packing the courts. You're going to see the biggest tax increase in history. You're going to see the Second Amendment just absolutely obliterated. You're going to see many other things. The Green New Deal will be put into effect. And people used to laugh at it when it was proposed 3 years ago by people that knew nothing about the environment, by the way. And they're going to raise taxes to a level, and they're going to spend a lot of the money foolishly on Green New Deal stuff that doesn't work.
I want to ask my team to put up a couple of numbers, and we're showing some information for our viewers, Mr. President, as you're talking and matching up a little bit. You were talking about the surge at the border. Let's go back to southwest border. Adults up 188%. And unaccompanied minors, I want to talk about the children because that's the mark against our soul. And your administration took criticism because we were taking in unaccompanied minors and they were getting separated from the adults at the border. And you see that, everybody on the screen, 92% increase of unaccompanied minors now in 2021 versus 2020. We're only 3 months in. So as we look at the screen, I want to match that now. Mr. President, when you look at these numbers and you look at what wiped away on the first day of President Biden's administration, an executive order, what exactly were you doing that was working better than what we see now? And I understand that people were flowing over now, but there were some things that you did. You had agreements with Honduras, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico. I want the audience to understand some of what was wiped away more than just, well, it had my name on it, because those numbers that we're looking at now are a mark against us. Those children, their lives are forever different, if they make it.
Well, first of all, I mean, the only problem with giving you this answer is you don't have enough time because, you know, you need about 2 hours to explain what we've done. What we did is incredible. But, you know, in a nutshell, I do want to start off by saying that they built the cages. They built cages for children. We didn't build them. They built them. And a famous picture appeared about the cages that were built. And then, fortunately, somebody remembered. And fortunately, we have guys like Morgan and Tom, how good. I mean, we have such professionals, Tom Homan. We have such great professionals. I watch them on your show. They really know their business, and they're, you know, they're not involved in this. They have people that have no idea. But they built cages in 2014, but that was during the Obama administration, and they blamed them on us. We didn't build the cages. They did. Very sad, you know, when they had a picture in the New York Times of children in cages, and it turned out that it was them, and the newspapers didn't want to do retractions, even though now everybody knows that's the fact. But as far as other countries are concerned, so we had Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and others. We were paying those 3 countries approximately $500 million a year. Who knows what they were doing with the money? You could imagine. They were supposed to use that money for economic development, keep people there. It all sounds good, but it wasn't being used for that. And people were flowing in, and they wouldn't take MS-13 gang members back. They wouldn't take anybody back for Obama. They wouldn't do it. They said, nope, don't ever land your plane here. Don't ever bring your buses here. Don't ever send a boat. Nothing. We won't take them back. Turn around. They were turning our people around. They were treating us like amateurs, which is what they were. And so I said, well, they was doing that at the beginning of mine, too. I said, so how much money do we pay these countries? $500 million. I said, stop payment. As soon as I stopped payment, all of a sudden they said, we would welcome our MS-13 gang members back into our country. We would welcome. Anyway, I got along very well with those 3 countries and really well with Mexico. The president of Mexico is a friend of mine. He's a great guy.
Excuse me, because I know I'm going to have to let you go soon, but I want to get this in there. Is that part of what's gone? I mean, is Biden maintaining these relationships? We can't do this without the countries south of the border. In fact, we had some video, and we can go back to Tijuana, Mexico. There are tent cities that have set up on the border waiting to get back into the United States.
Yeah.
Waiting
all
to
those
come
people
here
are going to come flooding in. Right. I kept them in Mexico. By keeping them in Mexico, Mexico becomes much tougher at their northern border because they don't want any more. So I said to Mexico, look, if you're going to do any of this stuff that's bad for us, I'm going to put tariffs on all of the cars that you make for the United States, because before my administration, they stole 32% of our automaking business. The unions don't realize that. You know, the union members realize it, but the heads of the unions that all support Democrats, no matter who they are, they don't realize it. But they took 32% of our automobile business. I said, all those cars that you make are going to be tariffed. So Mexico was great. I must tell you, Mexico was great. The relationships I developed were great. Well, no,
I mean,
now
we can tell that they're not doing that
They have
anymore.
a field day. They have people that are rank amateurs. They have people that talk about ideology, but it's not even good ideology. Why would it work? Why are we supposed to take care of the world, and in many cases, the world's criminals? And they're coming over not from the 3 countries plus Mexico. They're coming over now from Yemen. They're coming over from the Middle East. Who the hell knows what we're taking in? These people are destroying our country. I said it was going to happen during the campaign. That's why I got 75 million votes, probably much more than that. And it's a disgrace what's been allowed to happen to our country, and they're persecuting people. They're stopping them from talking. They're stopping free speech, and they're persecuting
let's get into that.
Great Americans.
Let's get into that. Now, let's get into the fact that as media, we cannot get into this border situation, that there is a lid on us with regard to those facilities. Did your administration ever consider some of the things that the Biden administration is doing, closing down a border? I still don't understand, by the way, Mr. President, how that would even really work if it's so porous the way it is. You can't close it.
Well, that's why you needed the wall. But now I built almost 500 miles of wall. So it's a much easier situation now. When I took it over, it was a disaster. But I built 500 miles of wall, and now, you know, you have vast sections. I mean, you see some openings, but the openings get closed. That's what the purpose is. You have to close them. Those contracts have been given a long time ago. And again, that was to get people through. But these are small openings. But that has to get closed. But the wall has made it so much easier for these people. And frankly, I mean, I even hear they want to tear down the wall, if you can even believe it. Tear down the wall. You know, this is not the way you heard it from Ronald Reagan. This is not a wall that should be torn down. This wall has made a tremendous difference of stopping sex traffickers, human traffickers, drug dealers, drugs. You know, drugs were way down under my administration that last year. Because we had the wall, we had 28,000 Mexican soldiers guarding for free.
We are up against a hard commercial break.
By the way, we
Will
paid nothing.
you stay with me through the commercial if we have to take it? My team's going to let me know I don't need to cut in.
Only because it's you. I will.
Well, thank you. I know we have so much to cover here. This topic of the border is so wide. So I want to scoot to the transparency and where you think we are with transparency, not just on this issue, but overall with this current president. 64 days on Thursday it will have been by the time we see a solo news conference. And as you can imagine, this will be a big part of the questioning. I mean, the media already started this weekend. I mean, they had to catch up to Fox on this, obviously, and some others. It took you 27 days, Obama 20. The second most with time was G.W. Bush, former president, Clinton 9 days. But 64 days it will have been on Thursday. And you can bet people are going to want to know about the border situation. What do you say about the transparency with the current administration?
Well, there is none. There is none. And, you know, I guess you're supposed to have a press conference on Thursday, but the questions will all be softballs. I've watched the interviews. I like George Stephanopoulos, but I watched those couple of interviews, and it was a joke. It was just like a softball. Anybody could answer them, and yet he almost couldn't answer them, to be honest with you, so you know that. So it'll be interesting. I hear the questions are all vetted. You don't have the same people in there. I mean, you might have the same people, but it's a whole different set of questions. It's ridiculous, the questions that are asked. You know, what did you have for dinner? What kind of ice cream do you have as he walks out? They never talk to me that way, and that's okay. I had a lot of press conferences. I enjoyed press conferences because you get the word out. It's the only way to get an honest word out, because the press is really not a free press. The press is not a free press in our country. Okay, so the way you get the press out is with press conferences. Now, he doesn't need them because the press protects him totally. I mean, anybody else, if that were me that hasn't had a press conference for as long, for the number of, I mean, with all the things going on, especially at the border, but really you have things as big as the border. We're not going to be energy independent within 3 months. I mean, think of that. I worked so hard. First time ever, we were energy independent. We didn't need Russia. We didn't need the Middle East. We didn't need anybody. We were energy independent.
This undoes all of
now
that.
It's being thrown away. And all those countries, by the way, including Ukraine, where his son has an interest, big interest, are going to make a fortune. They're going to make a fortune. And look at the way gasoline prices are going up at the pump. Harris, look at the gasoline prices, how they're going up at the pump.
And again, these are all things that if you had a traditional news conference a few weeks ago, we wouldn't be playing catch up on this. I don't know that you can get all of this done on Thursday. And, you know, when he was asked about the President of the United States there, we see video on the screen, Joe Biden, he was asked about going to the border, because I want to toggle back just a little bit, and the gag order that's on all of us there. When he was asked whether or not he would go, he said, at some point, you've been to the border, Mr. Trump, and you know that
Many
when you
times.
go, or the First Lady goes, as she did, Melania Trump, when you go to the border, you bring a different level of attention to whatever is going on down there. Democrats are not calling this a crisis, yet they sent in FEMA and HHS. So I want to talk with you about the transparency specifically with this issue. Should border agents be able to talk with us openly? I mean, our Griff Jenkins had to really get in there and follow some because we can't even do ride-alongs right now. What are your thoughts about what likely is going on behind the scenes that we can't see? That's a lot of questions, so I'll just let you go at it.
Well, I let the Border Patrol speak, as you know. I spoke a lot. I went to the border, and I went to the border also to learn, because as an example, I was going to build a precast concrete wall with nothing, you can't see through it, and I went with the Border Patrol, and they had a specific wall. They wanted it steel, they wanted concrete insets, they wanted rebar, they wanted different things, and they needed vision. They had to have great vision through the wall. I wouldn't have built the wall we had. I would have built a different wall, and frankly, it would have been less expensive, and it would have gone up in many ways easier, but it wouldn't have been as good. This one has everything, all the bells and whistles, all of the tremendous security, wiring. It's all wired for various forms of security and drones and everything you could possibly have. So I learned, you know, from being there. If I didn't talk to them, I would have had something that would not have worked like this one is working. So, you know, you have to go there. This is a major problem, and it shows a level of dishonesty. So they'll say something like, we did the vaccine, not Trump. Okay. And we have to respond to that. Then they'll say the same thing here. Oh, it was Trump's fault. And we had record good numbers. And this is not 20 years, as I said before. This is many, many years. It's never been like this. Nobody's ever seen anything like what's happening now. But I also said before, wait till you see what happens, because it's going to get worse. Look at the numbers of people that are heading up here. Harris, look at the numbers of people.
No, it's true, and they have now officially done what they think they can do. There's more to come. We don't know what that will look like. Before I let you go, just real quickly, most presidents, ex-presidents like yourself, do not weigh in at this level. Why did you feel like you needed to on this issue?
Well, you called me. I didn't call you, in all fairness. But the reason I weigh in is very simple.
You wrote the statement last night. It was pretty strong.
Well, I wrote a statement. I put out a statement. But the reason I weigh in is very simple. They're destroying our country. Very simple. It can't get simpler than that. They are destroying our country, and they're going to destroy it with tax increases, the likes of which nobody has ever seen before, in order to accomplish the Green New Deal nonsense. They're destroying it with woke. When China looks at woke and they see the biggest problem we have is Dr. Seuss, in the meantime, they're building factories and trying to kill us in so many different ways. They laugh at us. They think we're so... Frankly, they think our country is stupid when they look at this, when our competitors look at what's going on in our country, taking down the statues to great heroes and so many other things. Now, I do it because I want to do what's right, and they are destroying our country.
Mr. President, the 45th President of the United States, and we did call you, and we're glad you did. And we now have more information than we had on some of the issues with your border policies as well, and thankful for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Harris. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. My next guest knows what it's like firsthand at our border. As you heard the former president talking about it there and what he needed to see up close, and now the current president saying that he'll get there at some point. Art Del Cueto is here to react to my interview that I just had with the president.
Well, they're destroying our country. As the gentleman said, the violence in his country. Well, we're bringing the violence to our country because many of the people coming are not nonviolent people. They're violent people. Many of the people coming. These countries don't send out their finest. And in some cases, I'm sure you have wonderful, fine people, but you also have criminals. You have murderers, you have sex traffickers, you have a lot of very bad people coming into our country.
That was former President Trump on the migrant crisis at our southern border under President Biden now. My next guest has firsthand experience serving at our border. Art Del Cueto is the vice president of the National Border Patrol Council. Art, you watched the president there, and he was talking about some of the things that are going on now that they've wiped away his policies via executive order the president has, President Biden. What is your response to some of what you heard from President Trump just moments ago?
Harris, thank you for having me. First and foremost,
Absolutely.
For someone that is no longer president of the United States, he sure is on point with everything that's going on down there. And I think a lot of it is not failed policies from the current administration, but the removal of policies that worked from the last administration. And that's part of the problem.
You know, you heard the president talk about how important it was when he went down to the border. And by the way, some of these pictures are coming from a Democratic Congressman, Henry Cuellar, down in Texas. He wants everybody to be able to see. And Art, I know you've seen this in Arizona. This is going on, along the states where we share a border, a southern border with other countries, with Mexico, and then people coming from even more south of that. But the president talked about how important it was to put eyes on this because in order to fix it, you had to know what to do. And the border agents like yourself were really important to talk with. What are your thoughts about the fact that the media can't even really talk to you? Like our Griff Jenkins had to surreptitiously follow you because we can't do a ride-along with you.
So I was down there with Griff, obviously, and we saw what was going on in that area of Texas. But it's happening right across the entire border. And it's important to note that a lot of the issues that we're seeing is in the places where there is a barrier and where the wall has been built. That's where you're getting a lot of individuals that are turning themselves in, unaccompanied juveniles. And, for all the talk that was done in the past about separating families, these people they've been separating themselves. And one of my concerns and things that I would question is, on these unaccompanied juveniles that are just coming across, where are the parents? Why haven't the parents reached out to try to find their children? And at the same time, when you're looking at areas where, the border wall was not built yet, that's where we're seeing a huge number of gotaways. In other words, individuals that are crossing into the United States. We don't know their intentions. We don't know who they are. Frankly, there's no way to actually tell how many are actually coming through those areas. And those areas are happening, obviously, down here in Arizona. And I think that's where your real hardcore criminals are coming through, gang members, drug smugglers, sex traffickers, and everything else that was mentioned by President Trump.
I want to just quickly get to this. So you know that the former president's going to take some heat today saying that there are so many violent intenders coming in our direction, people with violent intentions. However, I've talked with the AGs of Arizona and Montana, and the meth crime, for instance, in the state of Montana, with the porous nature in just the last 61 days from the border, has gone up 88% violent crime and drug crime in that area, and they tie it directly to the movement of drug cartels in our country picking up from the southern border. Last thought, your thoughts on it.
Harris, it's heroin, it's meth, it's fentanyl, and the drug smugglers and the drug cartels are having a bonanza in our southern border, and it has nothing to do with race. Illegal is not a race. I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. We must defend our nation's borders.
Art Del Cueto, Vice President of National Border Patrol Council. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will take a break. When we come back, former White House senior advisor Stephen Miller is here to take us behind the curtain of Biden's border crisis. Democrats are now scrambling to cover up the truth, and federal border agents barred from speaking to the press. We'll get into it next.
When I talked to the Border Patrol agents up on Monument 3, they said they've never seen anything like it. More fentanyl than at any given time. And they're seeing something much different, where hundreds of men at a time rush an area to try to break through that didn't get finished. And what they're finding cattle ranches on the other side, that they're burning down the Americans' homes that they come across. It's the cartels that are making money, not only for drugs, but the trafficking of these young children, which could be the saddest thing I've ever watched.
That was GOP House Leader Kevin McCarthy with me on Fox News Primetime earlier this week, detailing the heartbreak that he encountered during his visit to El Paso, Texas last week, the epicenter of Biden's border crisis. Right now, more than 14,000 unaccompanied minors are in federal custody. It is expected to get even worse as the weather gets warmer, as we've reported. The Democrats, meanwhile, are still refusing to call this a crisis. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Friday.
Biden administration has this under control. It is change, and it'll take some time, but it is values-based, humanitarian in its aspects, pragmatic in with a plan to get things done, and not just a diversionary tactic on the part of the Republicans, because they are bankrupt of ideas on how to improve the lives of the American people.
Unbelievable. Pragmatic with a plan. Joining me right now is the chief architect of the Trump administration's immigration policy. He is former White House senior advisor, Stephen Miller. Good morning to you, Stephen. Thanks very much for being here. We have so much to get to this morning. You heard Nancy Pelosi. Now, this morning, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is out doing the rounds. He was on Fox News Sunday this morning as well, saying pretty much that this is Trump's fault, blaming it on the Trump administration, and actually saying that the border is closed. What can you tell us about what you heard from Mayorkas this morning?
I was stunned by the dishonesty of Mayorkas' presentation. He looked at the camera and he lied. He blatantly lied. And there's just no polite way to put that. First of all, he inherited from the Trump administration the most secure border we've had in this country. Between our public health measures, known as Title 42, our Safe Third agreements with 3 Central American countries, the migrant protection protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico, our asylum reforms or immigration court reforms, I could go on. You never had a better system for humanely returning illegal immigrants back to their home country. We have a crisis, a spiraling, massive, growing, surging crisis, for one very simple reason. The Biden administration terminated all of that to adopt a policy of catch and release. And so when Mayorkas says, as he did today, that the border is closed, he is lying. First of all, if you arrive at the border illegally, 17 or younger, traveling alone, you are resettled into the U.S. interior, and you are taken to the city and destination of your choice. That is not a closed border. As for family units, and those numbers are growing steadily, and they are overwhelming border agents. According to my best sources, roughly 80% of family units that arrive at the border are likewise released into the U.S. interior. Some border agents are driving them directly to non-governmental organizations in border towns, known as NGOs. Other times they're being sent to ICE, and then ICE is releasing them under a program known as ATD, or Alternative to Detention, which is a fancy way of saying you're going free. So we have an open border right now in this country. And as far as Nancy Pelosi saying this is values-based, what value, what humanitarian principle is served by rewarding and encouraging the brutal, monstrous trafficking of minors? What value or humanitarian principle is served by making it easier for criminal organizations to savagely assault innocent men, women, and children for profit? Because that is what is happening right now.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a break and continue this conversation. But as we go to break, I just want to remind people no one should be surprised. Here's then candidate Joe Biden telling us what to expect. Watch.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
Welcome back. We are back with former White House senior advisor Stephen Miller. Stephen, I want to show you this picture as we show it on the air. This is from GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, who tweeted out this picture. The photo was taken 6 days ago on private land at the border, and it is pretty much what he tweeted. This is what a crisis looks like. Where do they go now once they do get into America via the Texas border?
Yeah, so it's an important point to say this is not only a crisis for our border states, but for every state. Because once people illegally enter the United States of America and they're released, they go to every city, state, and town. That has obviously huge implications for public safety, our tax base, for our financial security, our health security, and obviously the spread of COVID as we're trying to stamp that out. One point I want to really drill down on, though, Maria, is the issue of how the administration is handling unaccompanied minors. They're typically between 14 and 17 years of age, but of course they can be younger than that. Because this administration, including Susan Rice, has said publicly that their policy is that they want to humanely deal with the minor crisis, by which I suppose they mean by incentivizing the largest global trade in child trafficking and smuggling, by guaranteeing that the aim of traffickers and smugglers is accomplished, which is absolutely immoral. But here's another point that's not thought about on this. The administration's policy of resettling any 17-year-old or younger who is trafficked to our borders is a global policy of family separation. What they are saying to every family on planet Earth is split off your own children and put them into the hands of coyotes and cartels if you want them to gain entry to this country. So instead of working through an actual humanitarian refugee process, if that's what you want to do, where you go in country with the UN, any part of the world where you want to, and you have an actual refugee screening process, and you establish a transparent refugee ceiling, instead of doing that, what they are doing is they are incentivizing long-term family separation. That is the policy of the Biden administration, and that needs to be said. It needs to be said clearly.
Well, there's also a major drug issue, drug implication, narcotics, as well as COVID. We had the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, admitting yesterday that they're releasing migrants into border communities without COVID testing. And that was a mistake. But that's what we have been doing, releasing them without COVID testing. Another person on this program made a point last week during Fox News Prime Time that we have a heroin problem in this country, and it starts at that border.
Yeah, so real quick. So number one, the humanitarian crisis this administration has created has also led to a drug crisis. I've talked to border agents who said they've seen large increases in hard narcotics, like meth, like fentanyl, like cocaine, coming across the border, while border agents are having to spend their resources dealing with the humanitarian crisis because of our open border policy. Secondly, ICE's interior enforcement mission, which involves removing dangerous criminals, including drug dealers, has been shut down. In a normal year, ICE removes from the interior 2,000 to 3,000 people a week, or arrests 2,000 to 3,000 people a week, and typically the vast majority of them are criminals. That number has been shrunk by as much as 90%. That means thousands of criminals every single week are being set free, including people involved in the drug trade, to reoffend in our communities. I ask you, is that humanitarian? Is that values-based? Is that just?
Yeah.
No, it is morally monstrous and indefensible, Maria.
It's absolutely extraordinary. Look, Stephen, I know that you've been working with certain attorneys generals to try to help them communicate and push back on this radical agenda. Tell me what's going on there. This week, I was able to speak with several AGs from across the country who have problems with everything from the XL pipeline being canceled to the border crisis to the fine print in the spending package that says they can't cut taxes for 5 years because they're getting federal money. What are you doing with AGs across the country, and what should states be doing now? Because clearly the Republicans cannot stop this radical agenda.
Thank you. Yeah, so myself, along with other former administration staffers who have an interest in upholding the great achievements that President Trump occurred, but more fundamentally, the laws of the United States, the Constitution of the United States, have been working with our state attorneys general to make sure that they are going to Article III courts, the federal courts, the third branch of government, to protect our Constitution, to protect our sovereignty, to protect our liberty. No administration has the right to repeal duly enacted law through executive action. No administration has the right to suspend any constitutional protection afforded to our citizens because it's politically convenient to do so. Obviously, this includes the immigration area, and Texas, Arizona, and Florida have all been leading the charge, especially on this issue of criminal releases, to say that you cannot release criminals into our communities that the law requires you to remove. And I would urge every journalist in the country, in addition to focusing on the ballooning border crisis, demand from ICE their internal statistics on every hit they're getting on criminal aliens versus the criminal aliens they are removing. And what you will see are there are thousands of criminal aliens in state and local custody who are no longer being picked up by ICE, who are being set free to commit additional crimes against innocent Americans. And that is heinous.
What a sad state of affairs. Stephen, we will continue to spotlight this. Thanks very much for all the information this morning. Stephen Miller joining us there with some breaking
security. Alejandro Mayorkas. Mrs. Secretary, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Chris.
I want to start with something that White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said this week. Take a look, sir.
We are taking steps to ensure that when kids come to the border, we look and see if they have a phone number in their pocket so we can call the family member and get them to those family members as quickly as possible.
I understand compassion for these children, but why is it the responsibility of the U.S. to resettle minors coming across the border illegally?
Chris, that is the law under the United States. We have an asylum program that recognizes young children, young vulnerable children's right to claim asylum, to claim fear from persecution by reason of their membership in a particular group. That is what the law provides, and we administer and enforce those laws.
You and the administration talk about being humane, but let's go back to what the Trump policy was, which in the case of non-Mexican minors was not, as has been suggested, simply to turn these kids around and push them back into the desert. In fact, we would coordinate with other countries. We would charter planes. We would send them back by airplane to resettle with their families. Why is it more humane to take these kids, to put them in Border Patrol facilities that were not meant for children, oftentimes for many more days than the legal limit?
Chris, that is not what the prior administration did. You'll forgive me. The prior administration did expel children, did fly children to countries from which they were fleeing. Countries that did not have the capacity to administer asylum claims, countries that suffer tremendous violence, poverty, corruption, and other infirmities. So to suggest that the prior administration handled the needs of children in a humane way is just false.
Well, you seem to have agreed with me, sir, that they would put them on planes. They wouldn't just send them back over the desert. They'd put them on a plane and fly them back to Guatemala or El Salvador. Are you suggesting that every minor, the thousands and thousands of minors coming across this country, has a legitimate asylum claim, and that a lot of them aren't just coming across the border because They want to have a better life here, which is understandable, but isn't necessarily our responsibility.
Chris, we administer our laws, and let me say a few things, if I may. Number one, the prior administration dismantled the orderly and safe way that these children could make their claims. It tore down the Central American Minors Program that allowed these children to make their claims under United States law without having to take the perilous journey. We are rebuilding that process. We are encouraging families not to send their children along the dangerous journey because so many do not make it safely. We are encouraging them not to do so. Yet, if they arrive at the border, we have a responsibility to allow them to make their claims under United States law and to address, these are vulnerable children, to address their needs, and we can do so in a safe and orderly manner. It takes time because the entire system was dismantled. We are working on it, and we will succeed because that is what we do.
I'm going to get back to that in a moment, Mr. Secretary, but the day after President Biden took office, he made this promise to the American people. Take a look.
The Vice President Harris and I and our entire administration will always be honest and transparent with you about both the good news and the bad.
So why has the Biden administration refused to allow reporters to see for themselves and to record what the conditions are under which these minors are being housed? Why, in fact, did you, when you went to the border on Friday and led a congressional delegation, why did you refuse to allow reporters to see the conditions under which these minors are being held?
Two things, Chris, if I may. Number one, let's not forget that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and we are focused on our operations, executing our operations in a crowded Border Patrol facility where hundreds of vulnerable migrant children are located, number one. And number two, we're working on providing footage so that the American public can see the Border Patrol stations. And I would encourage you and other reporters to see the facilities under the control of the Health and Human Services Department, where those children are sheltered and where they belong and where we are moving them as quickly as possible.
Secretary Mayorkas, respectfully, sir, I think that there is a safe condition under which a pool reporter and a pool camera crew could go into some of these facilities. This has been going on for 2 months now, and record the conditions under which these minors are being held. It seems to me to say it's impossible to do because of COVID sounds like an excuse.
Chris, we're working on providing access so that individuals will be able to see what the conditions in a Border Patrol station are like. But first things first, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and we're focused on operations and executing on our plans. That's our highest priority. But we are providing for that access, and certainly reporters can see the Department of Health and Human Services facilities in which children are sheltered for a longer period of time.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott raised two concerns this week about conditions in the camp for minors in Midland, Texas. Take a look, sir.
So there is no viable, usable running water at the location in Midland. And then on top of that, more than 10% of the migrants at the Midland location have now tested positive for COVID-19.
Mr. Secretary, why not let reporters go to see what the conditions are at the camp in Midland? And is it true that more than 10% of the minors in Midland have tested positive, and in fact that more than 200 migrants in Brownsville tested positive for COVID and then were released?
Chris, the minors who are arriving and who are placed in the Department of Health and Human Services facilities are tested. They are all tested, isolated, and quarantined. Our COVID-19 protocols that are administered by the Department of Health and Human Services are operated very efficiently. We also, I should say, work very closely with local officials in Texas, with local organizations to also test, isolate and quarantine children. And we offer reimbursement 100% from FEMA. And I do hope that Governor Abbott reconsiders his position of not allowing those local organizations and local officials to be reimbursed 100% by the federal government. That's all in the service of the public health imperative.
Excuse me, sir. I want to put up what President Biden has done on immigration policy in just his first 2 months in office. He halted part of Title 42 to allow unaccompanied minors to stay in the U.S. during the pandemic. He ended the provision that asylum seekers must remain in Mexico while their cases are being heard. And he suspended the safe third country agreements to share asylum seekers with other countries. You put out this statement on Tuesday. We are on pace to encounter more individuals on the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. Mr. Secretary, do you not see a connection between the surge at the border and the policy changes that Joe Biden has made in his first 2 months?
Chris, I do not. What I am seeing is the result, and what we are seeing is the result of President Trump's dismantlement of the safe and orderly immigration processes that were built over many, many years by presidents of both parties. That's what we are seeing, and that's why it's taking time for us to execute our plans to administer the humanitarian claims of vulnerable children. That's what this is about. This is about vulnerable children. And let me say one thing as well, if I may, Chris. Safe third country agreements is misnamed. There's nothing safe about it. To return people to the very countries from which they are fleeing persecution. That's just false, and we have replaced the Remain in Mexico policy with a safe and orderly triage system, working with our partners in Mexico and humanitarian organizations in the international space. And we are not expelling vulnerable children. At the same time, we are encouraging them not to take the dangerous journey because we are rebuilding orderly processes for them as well, as our country has always had until the prior administration.
One final question, sir. You say that you're encouraging minors not to come across. The message clearly isn't getting through. It's true that the number of people coming across the border began to increase in the final months of the Trump administration, but there has been a big, sharp spike since Joe Biden has come in. And I want to put up some of the numbers here. 74,000 border apprehensions in Trump's full month of December. 100,000 in Joe Biden's first full month in February. Just under 5,000 unaccompanied minors came across the border apprehended in Trump's final month of December, 9,400 in February. The numbers rose dramatically after President Biden took office, after he changed the policies. And in addition, for all your talk about minors, the fact is, sir, according to CBP, Border Patrol numbers, 58.87% of the family units that came across in February have been allowed to stay in this country. You are not returning them, the vast majority of them, back south of the border.
Chris, a few points. So you mentioned that the numbers began to spike up, admittedly, in the last couple of months of the Trump administration. Actually, the numbers began to spike in April of 2020. The numbers were extremely high throughout 2019. This administration does not
like they have
children
been in February,
from the arms of their parents.
Not like they have
Chris,
been in February.
Chris, we do expel families. We are working with Mexico to increase Mexico's capacity to receive the expelled families. The border is secure. The border is closed. We've been unequivocal in that, and we are operationalizing our processes, executing our plans. We are a nation of laws, and we treat vulnerable children humanely. We can do it, and we are doing it.
Secretary Mayorkas, thank you. Thanks for your time this week, and thank you for answering all our questions, and please come back, sir.
I look forward to it, and thank you.
Humanitarian crisis at our southern border, with U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents executing more than 100,000 apprehensions in February alone. That is a 28% increase from the previous month when President Trump was still in office. The Biden administration continues to bear no responsibility for the spike, despite overturning President Trump's tough stance on illegal migration. The Biden administration prefers to call it a human challenge. Joining me right now is the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, whose state is at the center of all of this. Governor, good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Of course, Maria. Good morning.
Governor, assess the situation for us. I know that you were at the border just yesterday, this weekend. I want you to walk us through what are the biggest and most important challenges our audience need to understand.
Two things, Maria. One is the dramatic increase in the influx of people coming across the border. Remember this, as you were kind of pointing out, it's the Biden open border policies that are inviting even more illegal immigration and actually have created this humanitarian crisis. As you know, I went down to the border this past week and I met with Border Patrol officers. And here's what they told me. The Border Patrol officers themselves told me that they informed the Biden administration that because of the policy changes, it was going to lead to this massive surge that we are just now beginning to see, knowing that it's going to be getting far worse in the coming months. They also said that the reason for the change, the reason for the increase in the influx is because of the policy change by the Biden administration. More importantly, though, Maria, is this challenge, and that is the Border Patrol officers told me that the Biden administration policies, they are enriching and they are empowering the drug cartels in Mexico who make money off of the people that they assist in smuggling them into the state of Texas. The cartels make money off of these migrants that you and your viewers see on TV. They also told me about the escalating numbers of the people coming across the border. Some quick numbers real quick. And that is over all of last year in the Rio Grande Valley sector alone. So for your viewers in Texas, Texas has several Border Patrol sectors. In the Rio Grande Valley sector alone, all of last year, they made 90,000 apprehensions. Already this year, in the first 2.5 months of this year, they've made about 110,000 apprehensions. Including in those apprehensions are 800 criminal aliens who have previously been arrested and exported from the United States, 78 sex offenders, and 62 gang members, which include MS-13 gangs. And so, Maria, in response to this, we had to launch what I call Operation Lone Star. Let me tell you what this operation does. Okay. What the cartels do, they surge all these people to the border and they fully occupy all the Border Patrol agents. And when those Border Patrol agents are occupied, they know that there are gaps along the border. And what the cartels do, they surge people through those gaps. Operation Lone Star includes National Guard as well as Texas Department of Public Safety officers to fill those gaps to prevent the cartels from bringing across the border the most dangerous criminal elements as well as the opioids that they're trying to smuggle across the border.
Now, this is putting our agents in harm's way, isn't it? I spoke with some border agents myself this week and last week, and they told me that a local congresswoman, Veronica Escobar, told them not to carry their machine guns because the migrants are feeling threatened. Now, I spoke with Congresswoman Escobar's office, and they are telling me she never said this. She never put anyone in danger, and she never told them. But the border agents are saying, no, she said, please don't carry your weapons, your machine guns, to the bridge because it is making the migrants feel uncomfortable and then they won't turn themselves in. Isn't that putting our agents in harm's way? Is that what's happening? Tell us, because she said she never said that, and she's absolutely denying that she said don't carry your weapons, your machine guns.
So our Border Patrol agents are being put in harm's way in several ways. One, because they are having to deal with the increase in the cartel activity. Two, as you know, the cartels are very heavily armed, and our Border Patrol agents have to respond to that, and they need all their weapons. But, Maria, there's another way in which our Border Patrol agents are being put in harm's way, and that is the Biden administration was not providing COVID vaccines for the Border Patrol in the Rio Grande Valley region. Because of my public outcry about that when I was down on the border, now, finally, the Biden administration has changed gears, and they are doing exactly what I called for, and that is providing the Border Patrol with the vaccines they needed because they are exposed to everybody coming across the border, and they need to be vaccinated. Finally, the Biden administration is stepping up and providing those vaccines.
So this drug war, the cartels, this is an incredibly dangerous situation happening right at the border. We have expectations that we're going to talk with Senator Cornyn in the next block about how much they are charging to get people across the border. He says it's from all countries, it's from all over the world, and depending on where you come from, it's a different price. One of the reasons is the COVID situation, as you mentioned. There is a story from the Washington Times that migrants are flooding across the U.S. border with as much as 10 times the COVID-19 rate as Americans. Your reaction?
I'm sorry, 10 times what?
10 times the COVID rate as Americans. In other words, it's 10 times worse, the COVID coming across the border.
So, Maria, I have not seen any data about what the COVID rate is. I do know this fact that came from the Border Patrol officers that I spoke with, and that is that there are migrants coming across the border who do have COVID-19. So you raise a point that I am expecting answers from the Biden administration immediately this week. We need the total number of migrants who've been apprehended at the border who have tested positive for COVID-19. The state of Texas is responsible for fully reporting out anybody in our state who has COVID-19. The Biden administration has refused and failed to give to our state the total number of migrants who have COVID-19. We expect that data, and we expect the Biden administration to step up and assist the state of Texas in being able to respond to that imported challenge, imported only because of the change in policies by the Biden administration.
Have you spoken with President Biden? Has he called you?
I personally have not spoken with President Biden about this. The last time I talked to him was when he was in Houston, Texas, a couple of weeks ago. But our office has been in constant communication with their office, with one exception, and that is we got surprise news at 9:30 last night, so 12 hours ago. We got surprise news from the federal HHS that they're going to be sending some of these migrants over to a holding facility in Midland, which, you know, if they're going to be working with us, the governor of the state of Texas has to know exactly what they're doing. How many people are they bringing in here? Where are those people going? Where are they going after that? What type of COVID protocols are they using? What are they going to do to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 concerning all the people they are bringing into the state of Texas? Maria, there are so many questions that are completely unanswered by the Biden administration and the danger that they are putting onto the backs of our fellow Texans.
Is that why they're sending FEMA in right now? Are they overwhelmed by the thousands and thousands of teenagers that they say that they need FEMA to now oversee it? This is the latest news.
So it is a fact that they are overwhelmed, but really what is stunning is they express surprise and shock about the fact that they are overwhelmed when the Border Patrol themselves and really everybody here in Texas has known that this is coming, especially because of the change in policies by the Biden administration. And so they are overwhelmed, and they're finally stepping up and providing the resources they need, but it's a day late, and it's really far short.
This agenda obviously has impacted Texas so much and the country. Governor, is there anything you can do about it? We're also talking about the administration wanting to remove the state's ownership and overseeing of elections with this H.R. 1. Can you do anything about it to not get the election oversight taken from the state of Texas with H.R. 1?
Absolutely. Maria, you may remember that before I was governor, I was the Attorney General of Texas, and when the Obama administration tried doing things like this, I filed 31 lawsuits against the Obama administration. The strongest tool that we have is the litigation tool. And when you look at some of the things that they're talking about with regard to H.R. 1, they're trying to institutionalize voter fraud in the United States of America. They want to make mail-in ballots permanent. Everyone knows, including Democrats in Texas, have said that one of the easiest way to cheat in elections is through these mail-in ballots. They want to make it harder to require the use of voter ID. They want to protect ballot harvesting. Real quickly, let me tell you an amazing story, because it was Barack Obama himself who knew about the dangers of ballot harvesting in the state of Texas, because under his administration, he sent his U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, as well as the FBI, to South Texas to arrest and to prosecute people who were involved in ballot harvesting that were using cocaine to buy votes through the ballot harvesting process in the state of Texas. It is a way to commit voter fraud, and it cannot be allowed.
This is absolutely extraordinary, Governor. Thanks very much for sharing this very important information. We, of course, will keep a spotlight on this subject, voter integrity. Governor, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Our prayers are with you,
Thank you, Maria,
and your leadership on this crisis at the border. Governor Greg Abbott, we'll see you soon, sir. Thanks very much.
Evening, everyone. Welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community, and especially pro-America. I have never seen a more dishonest set of interviews in my life than the ones offered up by Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas this morning on the Democrat-manufactured border crisis, which is now spiraling out of control, in the face of the mounting evidence of his incompetence and the Biden administration's cruelty. He lied and lied and lied and lied and lied again.
The border is secure. The border is closed.
That is a lie. The border is obviously not secure and obviously not closed. Illegal border crossings are heading for the highest levels in 20 years. What's our source for that claim? The Biden administration.
We are expelling families. We are expelling single adults.
Another lie. One of Biden's first executive orders explicitly aimed to reduce deportations.
We are safely processing the children who do come to our border.
And that's another lie, a truly sick one. Even NBC News says over 500 migrant children have been in custody for over 10 days, way over the 72-hour limit, in overcrowded facilities. Another facility, meant for 250 people of all ages, has over 3,300 people in it. What are you talking about, Secretary Mayorkas?
Border Patrol agents are focused on operations, on securing the border.
Focused on securing the border? Another outrageous lie. The administration is pushing Border Patrol to do the opposite, reportedly considering releasing illegal immigrants in the U.S. without a court date.
We are also working on providing access so the American public can, in a safe way, without jeopardizing our operations, see what is going on.
What? They've thrown the press out. It is a media blackout. Even Dana Bash at CNN noted that under the Trump administration, you could at least see what was going on. And of course, Mayorkas tried to make amends for his flailing, dishonest performance by trying to ingratiate himself with his boss in true North Korea dear leader style.
We are in the midst of a pandemic. We are, because of the extraordinary leadership of the president, climbing out of it more rapidly than ever before.
Oh, please. We're not climbing out of this pandemic because of Biden. We're climbing out because of President Trump and his Operation Warp Speed, which gave us vaccines in 1 year, not 5. But whatever else you may think about the inhumane chaos the Biden administration has created at the southern border, at least they have a clear message to migrants. Watch.
We are not saying don't come. We are saying don't come now.
I can say quite clearly, don't come.
Frankly, the message isn't don't come now. It's don't come in this way, ever.
So they're not saying don't come, except when they are saying don't come, or when they're in fact saying do come, but not yet, or actually not yet, but not like this. Got it? But in any case, it doesn't matter what they say. It matters what they do. And all their policies are screaming, come now. Even Democrats acknowledge this. Here's Texas Democrat Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, quote, "When you create a system that incentivizes people to come across and they are released, that immediately sends a message to Central America that if you come across, you can stay." Exactly. And that is what Biden did. He stopped all construction of the border wall and scrapped Trump's Remain in Mexico policy for asylum seekers. He imposed a 100-day moratorium on deportations, although at least that was blocked by the courts. He reversed Trump's public charge rule on immigration and welfare benefits. On and on it goes. Executive orders, rule changes, guidance, policy memos, all of it with one aim in mind, to make people think that the Democrats are compassionate. But look at the result. The very opposite of compassion. Young children, the vulnerable, the weak, yes, the tired, the poor, the masses huddled at the southern border, brought there by Biden, brought there by the revolting self-righteousness of the Democrats' open border policies. These are the people paying the human price for the left's reckless, despicable virtue signaling. Biden's kids, Biden's cages, Biden's crisis, an entirely avoidable, unnecessary humanitarian disaster. Follow us at Steve Hilton X and at NextRevFNC and share this message when we post it. Joining me now, while I calm down, Fox News analyst and former White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh, just before we get stuck into it, I just want to read you this statement from your old boss, President Trump. He said this today, quote, "The pathetic, clueless performance of Secretary Mayorkas on the Sunday shows today was a national disgrace. His self-satisfied presentation in the middle of the massive crisis he helped engineer is yet more proof he is incapable of leading DHS." I think we all watched that performance today, Kayleigh, and just thought, what is going on with this administration?
Yeah, President Trump is exactly right. I mean, it was his administration, after all, that warned the incoming Biden administration that this would happen should they roll back the policies. And what did they do? They did the diametric opposite of what they were warned about. They pulled back all of the policies, and now they have a crisis. But what is stunning, Steve, is just the absolute refusal to admit it. You played some very interesting sound bites by the current Secretary of Homeland Security. But another thing he said today was the word crisis is not applicable here. This is the same man that said we are about to have a 20-year high of encounters on our southern border. But the word crisis, in his words, are, quote, not applicable. That is absurd, and all of America can see that.
And by the way, Katie, I think that you may actually be right there when you describe him. Maybe we'll just think of him as the soon-to-be former secretary, because on the basis of this performance, yes, I don't know how long he can stay in that job. I want to play you something else which relates to the argument being made by Democrats now, as I said, which is that this is entirely created by Biden's policies. This is incredible when you see this quote from Biden himself talking about a surge at the border. Let's watch this.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
Oh, and he's trying to make out that this has nothing to do with what he said. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. There's that soundbite, but there's also the soundbite in 2019 debate stage, similar format, where he, along with his current vice president, along with his current secretary of transportation, all stood on the debate stage, raised their hand and saying, I want not only illegal immigrants to come to this country, but we'll give them health care when they arrive here. They have created this disaster, which has put kids in perilous situations, separated from their families. My former colleague Stephen Miller was on today and brilliantly observed that they've created a global separation of families, incentivizing parents to depart with their children, send them across the border in hopes that they'll get to America. You had the White House press secretary saying, come kids, we'll accept you if you're under 18. It is a heinous state of affairs when you're incentivizing that kind of perilous journey with smugglers, coyotes, and the disastrous sexual abuse that comes with that, physical abuse. It is not any journey any child should take, nor should it be incentivized by a sitting government.
Yes. And that's what makes me so angry about the moral preening of these Democrats. The reason they're doing all this is, to, as I noted, to try and make themselves look compassionate and kind. And yet what they're actually creating is the worst kind of cruelty. Last point to you, Kayleigh, just from your in your former professional role in terms of the communications around this. What do you make of the way that they're just kicking the press out and not allowing anyone to actually see what's going on in terms of the media access?
It is a cover-up. That's what it is. And we know that because we have Senator Murphy, who has said the images he saw brought him to tears. He's a Democrat, and he is one of the few people who's gotten his eyes into those facilities to see what is happening. But it's a cover-up where, you know, you have the White House telling us that very few families are being processed into the United States when, you know, again, my former colleague Stephen Miller is hearing from his sources in Border Patrol, actually 90% of families are being processed into the United States. There's so much we don't know, and we won't know until people get access to these facilities to see the kind of inhumane treatment that is going on in these facilities where kids are being shoved together, regardless of COVID restrictions, regardless of anything. And Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat, saying he was brought to tears by what he saw. If only the media could see as well, we'd know a lot more.
Exactly, and these are the people that promise to be transparent. Kayleigh, wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, joining me now, Florida Congressman Collas. Jimenez, you, sir, were at the border this week, and I heard you talking about that. I'd love to hear you describe what you saw, but the other part of this that I'd really love you to convey to our audience was something I heard you say on the radio this week, where you really in detail laid out the problem here in terms of the percentages of people who once they're in the country show up to court hearings and so on. That whole process, you laid it out so clearly. I'd love to hear you do that again.
Well, thank you for having me. So let's go to the process. The process before under the Trump administration was if you asked for political asylum, you were kept in Mexico. 90% of those asking for political asylum, it's actually denied by the courts. And so they're in Mexico, they get sent back to their country. With a new policy, you're allowed in the country. You're released into the country because these hearings takes anywhere from 18 months to 2 years to happen. They do come back for that hearing. What happens, though, again, 90% are denied, and then they're allowed. Those 90% are allowed a couple of days, couple of weeks to finish their affairs here in the United States, and they're supposed to show up for deportation. They never show up. So there, right there, the immigrant communities in Central and South America will know that, hey, before we used to have a 10% chance of getting into the United States. Now we have a greater than 90% chance of getting in the United States. So what do you think is going to happen? Exactly what's happening. And look, what I saw at that Customs and Border Protection facility, hundreds and hundreds of children, boys and girls, and I'm talking boys and girls. I'm not talking 17, 16. I'm really talking boys and girls. I'm talking 5, 6, 7. They come across the border by themselves. They have little pieces of paper telling them call so-and-so and address. But here's the thing. A lot of these girls, young girls, are being molested. Maybe up to 30% are being molested. It costs their parents $4,000 to $6,000 to get them across. A Chinese immigrant trying to get across costs $35,000. We estimate that the cartels, the multinational cartels, are making close to $500 million per month. They use these migrants to divert Customs and Border Protection agents to a certain section. Then they go ahead and rush the other sections that are unprotected, and they bring us drugs and all other kinds of mayhem that they bring. And so it's actually this is actually great for the multinational cartels. It's horrible for the migrants who are some of them are being murdered on the other side of the border if they can't come up with the money. They are being extorted, and they're also being used if they get across. Hey, you owe us $6,000. You're now an indentured servant here in the United States until you pay us back. Basically, it's modern-day slavery. That's what's going on in the border, and it's outrageous.
Such a fantastic benefit of your what you observed there for our audience to hear that. Thank you, sir. Just one thing I just want to quickly play you. This is the president today, I think, talking about his plans to visit and see what's going on the way you have. Let's just hear that and get your reaction.
Okay.
Are you thinking of going to the border?
At some point I will, yes.
Yeah, at some time I will, yes. I mean, what do you think of that?
This is a crisis right now of his own making. He needs to go to the border and listen to those Customs and Border Protection agents. They will tell him what he needs to do. He needs to give them more agents. He needs to finish the wall, and he needs to give them a technology, and he needs to change his policies back to what we had. And we also need to hire hundreds of additional judges so that we can adjudicate these claims of political asylum. If we do that, then we can get a handle again on the situation on the border.
Congressman, fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure.
All right, joining us now, the author of Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance. The reason, J.D., I wanted to have you join us tonight is you wrote a really powerful piece which got a lot of reaction this week, which put this whole border story in its overall context in terms of our economy and our society and the impact of uncontrolled immigration. I'd love you just to lay out your argument for us tonight.
Yeah, Steve, I think it's pretty simple. Look, we have a border crisis in this country because it's good for the political donors of both of our major parties, especially the Democratic Party, to have a border crisis. You ask yourself, who does this affect? Who is harmed by this? Well, we know that it's American service workers who have their wages lowered by illegal immigration. We know that it's people in my community who don't want meth and heroin flooding into their communities, who are harmed by a porous southern border. And who benefits from it? The global multinational corporations who love cheap labor. That's what this is ultimately about. Certainly it's the fault of the Biden administration, but this is a uniparty decision to have a flow of cheap labor across the southern border that's causing all of this misery on our side of the border, but of course also to the Central Americans who are trying to come across.
That's exactly right. So the people, this is, again, it's so outrageous when the Democrats present this as a compassionate policy, when it's the poorest who are being hurt by this, both in terms of those coming to the border, as I noted earlier, and as you've just noted, here in America. There's one particular story I thought that was really powerful that kind of brought this home to you. I think it was a hotel executive talking about how this impacts their business.
Yeah, this was in 2018, Steve, and I heard a hotel executive at a dinner I was at with my wife and I complaining that Trump's immigration policies were causing him to raise the wages of his hotel workers. And it just struck me how preposterous it was that we have these global leaders of corporations, some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world, who hate restrictive immigration because it means they have to pay their people more money. That's exactly why we should have a restrictive immigration policy in this country. And unfortunately, we've forgotten those lessons. We've allowed the oligarchs to set our immigration policy. And again, now we have all of this misery on both sides of the border. Drugs flowing in, wage competition for our own workers, these girls that are being sex trafficked, the human smugglers that are being enriched. It's just a terrible crisis, and we should call it for what it is. It's a crisis that's been born by people who want cheap labor. And unless we push back against it, unless we call it what it is, I don't think we're ever going to have the courage to actually definitively get this debate on the other side.
And would you say that the Republican Party, I don't want to say the establishment, but just the party generally, in your observation, you talk to a lot of people within the Republican Party on all sides. Have they got this message? I mean, President Trump really kind of shifted a lot of attitudes, but what about the party today?
Absolutely. I think the grassroots of the Republican Party is firmly behind a strong border because they know that it does lead to these problems. Unfortunately, you do have some folks, I think especially in the donor class of the Republican Party, who are very aligned with the donor class of the Democratic Party, who like the cheap labor, who like the open border policies. And so you do have this internal struggle. But the good thing about America, of course, is that the majority often wins. It hopefully always wins. And in this particular issue, the Republican majority is very clearly on the side of a strong border.
Yeah, exactly, and that's you know, actually, and that is the morally righteous and noble position. That's the thing that we have to keep emphasizing. That's why I keep coming back to the cruelty that's on display at the border. The Democrats want to make themselves look like the compassionate ones. They are not. JD, great to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Joe Biden is quickly turning into the most structurally dishonest president in American history. The Democrats and their media servants endlessly called Trump a liar, but was there ever a more direct and transparent president in office? Trump was exactly what he promised during the campaign. Biden, on the other hand, was sold to us as a centrist, but is now being used as the decrepit fig leaf for a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren agenda. They pretend it's for the people, but it's fundamentally elitist. There's certainly nothing to do with the carefully crafted lie of middle-class Joe from Scranton. That Joe disappeared a long time ago. And that fall on Friday said it all. Stumbling and bumbling around. This man is obviously not the one in control.
What am I doing here? I'm going to lose track here. I want to thank the former general. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there. Now, when President Harris and I took, I'm having troubles here, okay?
Yes, we can laugh, and we should. Don't feel sorry for him. As we've told you, he's been plotting and scheming to get to the Oval Office for over half a century. He's the worst type of corrupt machine politician. He knew he wasn't capable of doing this job, yet still he grasped for it. So yes, we should mock Biden. But here's the serious part. If Biden is president in name only, if he's not in charge, who is? We say this often because it's important and it's true. The people in charge are the power centers of today's Democratic Party. Government unions, the permanent bureaucracy, and the woke left. With Trump, the Democrats and their media servants barely stopped waving around the 25th Amendment for far less than this. When we have a president in name only, obviously just a wizened front for a far-left agenda that no one voted for, has there ever been a more justifiable argument for using it than now with Biden? Joining us, author of They Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste, The Truth About Disaster Liberalism, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Jason, your reaction?
Thanks, Steve. I think we're witnessing in Joe Biden one of the weakest presidents this country has ever seen. I mean, literally the wind is blowing this man over. And it worries us that there are a lot of people out there who are behind the scenes, who are puppeteers that are controlling this person. That's the concern, is that he does not have the same cognitive capability that he did a few years ago. I'm not a doctor, I can't give an analysis, but I can watch the tape, and I have met with the man when he was much more vibrant, much more in tune. I have spent personal time with him in the White House. And compared to it now, it is just absolutely night and day. And I think behind the scenes, you have a Kamala Harris, you have a Susan Rice, you have Brian Deese, you have the chief of staff. You have a lot of these other people behind the scenes that you never ever hear from, but are pushing a progressive agenda that is so far left. It's further left than anybody ever thought it would be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that's what's so undemocratic about it, and that's why it's of serious substantive concern, not just because we laugh at Biden's gaffes. It's much worse than that. That's why I use that phrase, structurally dishonest. The structure is there. They got this front person who just signs off on everything. I think one of the biggest clues to that was the fact that on the first day, Joe Biden, who sold himself as this centrist, signed that executive order about biological males being able to play in girls' sports. Whoever thought that was the first on the list for Joe Biden?
No, he was dishonest about that, didn't tell us it was coming. He was totally dishonest about his immigration plans and moving so aggressively on just totally opening up the borders. He wants to raise taxes. He wants to do all of these progressive leftist things. What they sold hiding Joe Biden when he hid in his basement during the campaign is that it was going to be a return to normal. Well, that was anything but normal moving forward right now. He has not given a State of Union address. Every president in my lifetime has gone before Congress and gone before the world in America and spent an hour, hour and a half, close to 2 hours explaining where they're going and what they see in this nation. But Joe Biden hasn't done that. He's supposedly on Thursday going to give his very first press conference. Yeah. I have doubts about his ability to take those questions, and he's just not there like he used to be in the past.
And so finally, Jason, what is the remedy for this? I mean, as I said, there was constant talk of the 25th Amendment in relation to President Trump. I mean, look, you may not have agreed with President Trump. A lot of people didn't. But there was no disputing the fact that he was in charge. He was capable of doing the job. They just didn't like the way he was doing it. With Biden, isn't that more relevant?
I think it is relevant. I don't think we're there yet. That is an extreme measure to take it, and I don't think we're there yet. But what we don't have is an aggressive, fair, and honest media that is doing their jobs, calling balls and strikes, and working behind the scenes to reveal and expose these things before it becomes too late. They are totally in the pocket of Joe Biden and the left and the Democrats. They need to do their job, and thus far they have not.
Exactly. Well put. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, one Democratic pollster found the reason why so many Latino voters defected from the left and voted for Trump in the last election. We'll show you what it is next. There you are, the Biden swamp is back. Last November, we exposed Joe Biden's scheme to bring the swamp directly into the White House by hiring notorious Washington lobbyist Steve "the Swamp" Ricchetti to serve as one of his closest advisors. Steve Ricchetti and his brother Jeff Ricchetti have been a part of the revolving door between government and big business since the late 80s. And now, thanks to his brother sitting at Biden's right hand in the Oval Office, Jeff Ricchetti is cashing in. In the 11.5 months since Biden clinched the Democratic nomination, Jeff Ricchetti signed 12 new lobbying clients to his firm, almost the same number he'd signed in the previous 9 years. One of them was Jeff Bezos' Amazon, who, if you remember, wouldn't help Trump during the pandemic, but went out of their way to offer help to Biden with vaccine distribution. For Bezos, it's not enough to lobby the government through his own newspaper, the Washington Post. He needed his own lobbyist inside the Oval Office. And 2021 is shaping up to be even better for Jeff Ricchetti, latest big-name client, General Motors. The Biden administration is stuffed full of lobbyists and swamp creatures who've spent their entire careers spinning around the revolving door. It's clear that this administration is shaping up to be one of the most corrupt in history, and the most disgusting example is Steve Ricchetti. He must be fired. Back with us now, our friend Jason Chaffetz with the reaction. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, this is the disgusting part of Washington, D.C. It is prevalent, it is brazen, it is wrong, but it is out there. Government officials have to file documents. Those documents then can be traced back and tied to these lobbyists, because the lobbyists will also need to make certain disclosures. Now, I can't promise you that 100% of them are always accurate, but it does give you a glimpse with these organizations that will go in and dive in and look closely at those ties. And you have to just follow the money, Steve. There are trillions of dollars going out the door. When Congress got rid of earmarks, they suddenly rushed over to the executive branch because they realized that, hey, that's what's happening. But now Nancy Pelosi wants to bring back earmarks. So the lobbyists are just going to have a field day on both the Congress and Joe Biden. It's a dream come true for them.
And this concept of the revolving door, it's so central to the way the swamp works. And there's so many people now in senior positions in the Biden administration. They were in the Obama administration. They go out, they join these lobbying firms, or now they call them consultancies or strategic advisors or whatever, or they start their own. And then they're straight back into government. It is total corruption. Great example, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, he had one with West Exec Advisors, I think. Literally on their homepage of their website, it says, from the Situation Room to the boardroom. And now he's back in the Situation Room.
Yeah, and they pay these people hundreds of thousands of dollars to sit in on the sideline until they're back into office. And probably nothing's worse, Steve, than Joe Biden's brother, Frank. So this starts at the very top. Frank is not an attorney, but he works for a law firm who says, hey, we've got great ties. If you want to lobby Congress and the executive branch, use us, the president's own brother. It runs from the very top all the way down.
What, wait, that's right now?
Yeah, that's going on right now. As we speak, they're running ads. It's the Berman Law Firm in Florida. The day of the inauguration, they were running ads saying, hey, look at us. Look what's going on here. Frank Biden's brother is going to be the president. If you want a great law firm, sign us up. Call us.
That's amazing. See, we did something on the Biden family corruption, before the election. We did the brothers, and that's another segment you've got to give us an idea for. Jason Chaffetz, we've got to leave it there, but great to see you as always. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Don't forget to set your DVR so you never miss a show. See you next Sunday when the next revolution will be televised.
Books are going to be written about the harm done to this generation of kids.
Biden himself, who makes the decisions, he really has a view of China that is just outdated.
Look, you can't put people through the ringer when they fly into JFK, but then let them go off into the wild once they come across the border.
What the unions have done to the United States is a disgrace.
They're breaking the law. They're coming into this country illegally. And just giving them a ticket and a date saying, see you in 3 months or see you in 2 years is not the answer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Bennett, and welcome to Wise Guys. We are joined by some very wise guys indeed. Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China. Dr. Marty McCary, professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Conrad Black, former international newspaper publisher. Tyrus, Fox News contributor and a Fox Nation host. Just want to say a word about Tyrus. Tyrus, you made the cut today. I heard you the other day on TV. People were talking about Shakespeare out of the schools and Romeo and Juliet and 2 14-year-olds committing suicide. Ridiculous play. That's not why we read Shakespeare. We read it for the language, as Conrad said, and we read it because, as you said, the truths of the human condition. Smart guy. Let's jump in. Let's go to politics and policy, and everybody play here. What do you think of the number one polling problem objection is of Democrats? Did you see it? Their number one worry? Trump voters. Not white supremacists, not Proud Boys, Trump voters. We're in a difficult place right now. There seems to be so much
Trump
vengeance.
hate was their only policy for the last 5 years. Trump hate is all they've had. That was all.
So now you build a governance structure on hating Trump. Trump is gone.
But they'll walk off the cliff. I mean, it's starting to become obsolete already. And they are going to have to face up to the responsibility of governing.
We saw this with President Biden's executive orders. You know, on January 20, which was just hours after he took the oath of office, Biden issued an executive order which canceled President Trump's May 2020 executive order that prohibited utilities and grid operators from buying equipment from China. Now, there's no defense for doing that except that Biden hated Trump, because what President Trump did was prevent the Chinese from sabotaging our grid. And we saw in Texas what happens when you have a grid that is not resilient. And by the way, this is not a theoretical concern about Chinese sabotage, because the Chinese turned off the lights in India's Mumbai last October. So, you know, there's been a number of these orders from President Biden, which has canceled protections that President Trump has put in place. And there's no explanation for it other than Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, one of the heroes of our modern COVID pandemic is Admiral Brett Giroir. He basically built the railroad for vaccine distribution, set up all the channels, and as stuff came off the production line, it went downstream. And now what you're seeing is a full sort of taking of all the credit by the new administration, erasing Dr. Giroir from history. And the man instead has been labeled as a Trump guy and may have a tough time getting a job right now. Ironically, he is the man we all have to thank.
Can Biden wreck the country? Obviously, I feel very strongly on this. All of you may not agree with me, but it looks to me like he is systematically trying to destroy everything that Donald Trump did, most of which I agreed with that Donald Trump was doing. How long does this take, with all due respect, to disagree with you? I used to think so. I know Joe Biden. Joe Biden confirmed me as the first drug czar. I don't know who the hell he is anymore. We went from the president who was the least programmed president in American history, you know, just no program at all, said what was in his head every day, to it looks to me like a Manchurian candidate.
He's representing 3 parties. He's a moderate. He's got progressives and socialists. So he's got a 3-headed dragon underneath him, and he had to make a lot of deals to get their support. The Bernie Sanders camp, the super progressive camp. You know, he needed to appease all of them to get in the White House. Now he's there, and they all want, well, I helped you get there. I want this and I want that. And we're seeing it's not going to be a Republican-Democrat fight. It's going to be a civil war inside the Democratic Party, which is going to affect, which I think is going to be a one-term presidency, just based off America is tired. We're just coming out of a pandemic. You promised us unity. There's been 2 big opportunities for him to show that. During that speech the other night, Operation Warp Speed, you could have tipped your hat to the previous administration. You could, and we'll take it from here. That would have been at least some of the president, the Republican supporters who didn't vote for you would be like, thank you. You know what? You have my ear. But he didn't do that. Instead, he threw a slight because if he would praise any one of the previous administration's successes, then he would either get attacked from his progressives or he would get attacked from the socialists, and the moderates just aren't strong enough in the Democratic Party to let him down. So it's a three-party fight for who's running the White House, in my opinion.
Right. Okay, great discussion so far. We will be right back. We're back with more of the State of the Nation. Let's go far afield. Gordon, China, what's going on? What are their ambitions? What are their ambitions in the world? How does it affect us?
Well, certainly, Bill, China has grand ambitions. Xi Jinping has been dropping hints that he's the world's only legitimate sovereign, that China's the world's only sovereign state, and that everybody else is a colony. We even have Chinese officials starting a half-decade ago saying that the moon and Mars should be part of the People's Republic of China. In other words, sovereign Chinese territory. Now, of course, this is ridiculous. This is absurd and ludicrous. But we've got to listen to what these people are saying, because Xi Jinping right now, he's incredibly arrogant. The United States, he doesn't respect us. And I think that Xi sees a closing window of opportunity. So this is a very consequential moment in history.
You said closing moment of opportunity the other day, and I listen to you guys, all of you guys, all the time. You said something about there's a time frame, something about 5 years or 5 times as fewer opportunities in the future. I couldn't get the exact reference, but you said this is their moment. China seizes this moment, carpe diem, or they lose the moment. How long is the moment, and what is the moment?
Well, people talk about a decade of concern, the 2020s. And there are a number of time frames here. So, for instance, they've got the 14th five-year plan, which really sets their goals for the half-decade. Also, Xi Jinping has been talking about 2035 as a deadline for China to accomplish a number of things. And this year is the 100th anniversary of the formation of the Communist Party. That's July. And one more, 2049, 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. So these are dates that Chinese people talk about. And one other date. Just yesterday, we heard that a Chinese academic was saying that Xi Jinping believes that he has a 5-year deadline to annex Taiwan. And that could very well determine what the world's agenda is, to protect that island.
Yeah, what is the next flashpoint, or what is the next thing to look for? Taiwan, Hong Kong, the islands, confrontations between U.S. military and China. What are we looking for? What are we worried about? What's going to likely precipitate something that may be hard to recall?
Yeah, we don't know what the flashpoint will be, but we know that Chinese troops are deep into Indian territory in Ladakh and the Himalayas. There's Chinese encroachments into India's Sikkim. There's Chinese encroachments in Nepal. China flies its planes through Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, and Chinese patrol ships go into Japanese territorial waters in the East China Sea around the Senkakus. Any of those places or others could just blow up. We don't know. Xi Jinping controls this agenda. We don't.
2 questions. Is the Biden administration ready for China? And 2, if there is action on Taiwan, will we honor that treaty, and what will happen?
They've bought up everything. They've increased their military while we're arguing over tweets and what vote happened that, and we're fighting amongst ourselves. China's won. They're there. And now it's like, what do we do now? I don't necessarily know what we can do in the near time, in the short future, because the sheriff is gone and our enemies are emboldened and our allies are frustrated. So, I mean, it's really a precarious time to take naps, so to speak, when we really need the country needs to be unified, strong, and direct, and we're not seeing that, especially with the language he uses with China. If we could just, and I hate going to whataboutisms and stuff because I really feel that's not the way to go, but if this was President Trump talking about Russia the way that President Biden's talking about China, would be doing flips right now. Would be the cover of every news and be like, hey, he continues to romance them. He literally said that concentration camps was a cultural thing. Because the fear of China. China obviously has, I hate to say this, I hate conspiracies, I'm a facts guy, but we made the same inference or the same accusation with President Trump with Russia. I think it's safe to say that you can make the same inference with Biden with China. The difference is China is a monster, a real life monster, economically, militarily, and their influence technology around the world.
Yeah, I think that President Biden himself has a view of China that is just outdated. He keeps on calling it a competitor. He won't use the term adversary, and he certainly won't use the most appropriate term, which is enemy, because that's the way the Chinese think of us. In May 2019, they declared a quote-unquote people's war on America, and that pretty much defines the relationship from China's point of view. You know, with regard to Taiwan, I hope that the Biden administration will defend Taiwan, but we don't know because, you know, Biden sees the world in very different terms than he should. This is important that we tie up our allies. And, you know, when we think about India, which really is the linchpin in Asia right now for us, the Biden administration looks like it's going to continue the Trump initiatives to operationalize the Quad. That's the loose grouping of Japan, India, Australia, and the United States. So I see that as a good sign, but, you know, he's got some good people working for him, but Biden himself, who makes the decisions, he really has a view of China that is just outdated. And we saw that during that CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper, where President Biden says, oh, you know, genocide and crimes against humanity, they're just the result of cultural norms, which is an inappropriate and certainly a disgraceful statement for him to have made.
Good. Gordon, move us from China to the border. Is there anything to be said there? Chinese action at our Mexican border, our southern border, as a way of segueing to talk about the immigration issue?
Yes, I mean, we have an open border down there, despite what the White House says, and fentanyl comes through that border. Now, we know that fentanyl or its compounds come from China, and it's not like the Communist Party is trying to stop that. You know, the Communist Party runs a near total surveillance state, so they know about these big fentanyl gangs, and they're getting this stuff into the U.S. and killing Americans, about 30,000 a year, with fentanyl. And they are able to do it because they've got an open border with Mexico.
Great. Thank you, panel. More discussion on this coming up. Welcome back to the Wise Guys. We've got more to cover. Let's hand it over to Tyrus. Tyrus, the situation at the border seems to be the headlines now. How bad is it? Where did it come from? What do we do?
I think everything's kind of related. I think I grew up in California, the border issue, crisis happening, depending on what part of the world you're on as far as what words you can say that are safe or not, has always been there. But the one thing during the Trump administration is that the mainstream media did a really good job of painting President Trump as this evil empire. ICE was this door-kicking, bashing monster that would pull you out of your home and take your babies into the night. So there was this stigma there where people would not take the chances of trying to cross in the border. They wouldn't pay a smuggler $10,000 to try because they know that ICE is going to get him. What you're seeing now at the border when families are being stopped and being turned back and they're crying and they're shocked is because the media has made it to where they think that this is the new utopia. Forget that there's a pandemic going on. Forget that our border should be iron tight just for health reasons, let alone anything else. But basically, as soon as the catch and release things are opened up, the floodgates are open because even if they stop you, they can't arrest you. They can't do anything to you. So then now that narrative is being spread everywhere. And the Biden administration, instead of taking an opportunity to build on unity, they just want to tear down everything the previous administration did instead of building on it. Our border patrol, our border situation was working under President Trump. And now they think the doors are wide open and we are seeing unbelievable amounts of numbers of groups of people just coming from all over the world because the way in the United States is Mexico.
Did I hear this correctly? I thought, for the most part, tracking around on TV, that most of the media was ignoring the border situation. You're telling me that a lot of the media is celebrating the border situation, actually saying this is a good thing?
They preach the inhumanity, the monstrous behaviors of what was going on with the border. And then, so once they celebrated President Trump was gone, i.e., hey, the monster's gone, the border's open again. We don't have to be. So even if they weren't saying, yay, we think it's great that people are flooding in, they painted that picture. They painted that that narrative to where the word now is out that now that Biden's in, things are going to go back to normal. Democrats are going to make it better. Progressives are going to welcome us. So that's what happened. They didn't build on it. They didn't say, well, we're going to continue. They didn't put the message out there that, you know, we got to keep our borders strong and we need to follow up on things. You can have issues about when you put people in I think a cage is a prison cell myself, but whatever you want to call it, you're detaining them. You're stopping them from a criminal. It's not a pretty thing. It's not polite. They're breaking the law. They're coming into this country illegally. And just giving them a ticket and a date saying, see you in 3 months or see you in 2 years is not the answer, especially during a pandemic.
But it's the numbers. It's the numbers now, right?
Yep.
I mean, let's get everybody out of the discussion. The numbers are enormous. The policy is different. You don't have the hold in Mexico. You don't have the other things you mentioned. But the numbers are overwhelming. We're seeing some of these Democrat congressmen at the border who represent border districts starting to complain. They denied the language here. Language is critical. That it was an emergency, but now they're sending FEMA. I believe the second letter of FEMA is emergency. Please, how overwhelming is this thing going to be, and how does it end up? What happens? Do they finally call it by the right name? Do they try to go back to the Trump policy? By the way, could they go back to Trump policy, the hold in Mexico?
Well, they'd have to change the name, obviously. I mean, they would have to.
Sure.
If they were, like I said, if it was about one of the big things we heard, and that China is relevant in this. One of the things we heard in the election from Biden's team and the side was unity. We were going to use unity. We were going to build. We were going to fill in that giant Grand Canyon. And you don't build unity by tearing down everything the previous administration did.
You have to resurrect the border and call it something different.
Dr. McCary. Some of these folks are coming in with COVID. The checks here are not as careful, if at all, as they are in many of the borders. Is there a risk here? But first of all, just on the COVID level.
Absolutely. Look, you can't put people through the ringer when they fly into JFK, but then let them go off into the wild once they come across the border with a positive COVID test. And in a single week, there were over 131 cases of positive COVID tests. And when you don't plan, this is the situation that you have. And just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not a problem. When people have a positive test and then run off and basically settle into a new town, that's a real health concern.
And the numbers, again, seem to be increasing. The checks do not seem to be increasing. So this problem gets worse. Again, I'm just trying to figure out, how does this sort out? Do they say, okay, we made a mistake? Do they change the language? We're going back to Trump policy. The way they're going now, the numbers are going up. Things just are going to get worse and worse and worse. It's going to be harder and harder for them to deny the nature of this crisis and emergency.
But Bill, the press is so docile. The press is so docile and rabidly partisan that they'll give them a blank check. Whatever they say, they'll say this is the truth, and any opposition to it is a continuation of the insurrection. So they've got an opportunity to put across a big lie to cover a big mistake. And presumably somebody around there will do the thinking necessary to connect those two, because it cannot go on like this.
How long does this intransigent hatred of Trump last so that it blinds people willingly or unwillingly to other realities? Can people get over this? Where's the independent press? Where are the reporters who are saying, wait a minute, we weren't crazy about Trump, we didn't like what he said about us, but what the hell's going on now?
Yeah, well, I think until the ad campaign stops from the media, where every story we hear about immigrants crossing the border illegally is a mother of 3 who's here for the American dream and has overcome. And that's going to be the poster child for every story on especially the left, the mainstream media. That will be the story. It won't be that they're stopping drug mules and they're stopping caravans carrying tons of cocaine and marijuana and fentanyl. Those won't make the cut. What will be those feel-good stories. So if anyone talks about the evil empire coming back and shoring up our borders and making to we're pushing everybody back, because again, it is a pandemic, and if I can't step out my house, if my house is closed, the border damn sure shouldn't be open. Because you get more social media flack about talking about going outside with a family of 6 to go to the park. People are like, oh, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. But at the same time, thousands thousands, tens of thousands of people strolling in, and we don't know if it's a new variant, like we're working with a vaccine right now, and we just have unchecked coming in, and it's just, I see it, and the fact that we're not seeing it at the higher up, it won't get in any play until it's in their front door, until Don Lemon or one of those fighters for freedom get it in their front door, and they're affected, and their family members affected, or their neighborhood, or their bottom line or paychecks affected. That's when you'll see a change, and then it will be a really fancy, cool name, and they'll have a couple of Grammy Award singers to sing about it, and then it will be a good thing.
There's a dimension of this I haven't mentioned back in my days as drug czar, and I was pushing the Trump administration with Tom Cotton and others to declare the cartels international terrorist organizations, which would allow us to be much more aggressive. All great minds on this panel. Stay tuned.